Ken, with the election of the Rudd Labor government, we saw the introduction of the NRAS program, the National Rental Affordability Scheme, with two objectives at the time: economic stimulus, but also addressing the housing affordability issue. It was perhaps not the best implemented policy at the time, but did you see it have a noticeable impact on the availability of affordable housing stock? And then the second part of that question is, sitting here today, what should an Abbott government, what should an Andrews government, etc., be doing to try and address this growing and increasing issue in a perfect world?
Yeah, thanks, John. That's an easy one. The first thing probably to be said is that the illusion of house price growth, when your house is 6 or 8 times average annual salary, makes people feel wealthy. But when they downsize, they're paying more for whatever they're downsizing to. So the relativities don't change that much. So there's a value proposition for the consumer that is a little bit out of whack at the moment. The National Rental Affordability Scheme was along with all of the other economic stimulus packages of the jobs and nation building, whatever it was planned, was entirely about keeping the construction industry going. If you looked at the GDP graph that Alan had up before, you could see the dive between 2008 and how it came out again in 2009. So there was a huge amount of growth all around the country as a result of that. People talk about affordable housing, and yet they're generally talking about affordable rental housing. When you're talking about affordable rental housing, you're talking about housing for the lowest third of incomes. You're not talking about affordable rental housing for architects in Balmain or Toorak. And it doesn't take much to begin to shift that picture, and that's a thing that is not well understood. There's 100,000 people who are homeless in Australia on any given night, and there's an affordable rental housing shortfall for people on the bottom third of incomes that is as high as 600,000 units spread around the country. But we only have an undersupply of housing of about 200,000, and that undersupply of housing is expressed differently geographically. So buried within the numbers is the real problem. The National Rental Affordability Scheme was I'm going to use a technical term here, it was a bastardised version of the American Low-Income Housing Tax Credit Scheme. It was really badly implemented. So for people who are in finance in the room, you would understand that as the world economy is crashing, as confidence, business and domestic, is retracting, this is of course the right time to introduce a poorly understood housing bond subsidy scheme for mum and dad investors. Disastrous timing, it's unfortunate. Great product, however, badly administered, but currently great product. So if I take a regional area which I'm familiar with, centre of the universe, which we refer to as Bendigo, we've had vacancy rates down as low as 0.1% for more than 2 decades. You need 3% roughly in a vacancy rate to have a viable, reasonable rental market where there's an element of choice and landlords actually have to compete. Residential landlords in Australia have not been competing for a very long time. Our residential vacancy rate is now at 3%. Real estate agents are losing their minds in Bendigo because it's been so tight for so long. And we've got vacant brand new properties because NRAS delivered a modest number of new rental properties. You don't need to put 600,000 rental properties in the market to fix it. You don't need to put 100,000 properties in the market. You probably need 100,000 over a period of time, perhaps 5 or 10 years, because most of those people are already living somewhere. What it just does is it equalises the cost a little bit and restores some balance to the rental markets. So NRAS, good product, badly executed, and a sensible way to go forward. Most people in this room, I imagine, that government provision of services is not generally a good thing, but the government funding of policy that enables services generally is, and it creates private sector competitiveness or versions thereof. So NRAS was actually an investment product to get people to build housing for people who couldn't compete in the market. We used to call that public housing. That's a good way to go. The more people who are on low incomes who have affordable rental housing, the more money they are not spending on overpriced housing, the more money they are spending at Lidl or Aldi, or Coles preferably, the more money that they are spending in the economy widely. The thing about low-income earners, they spend every cent they get, every cent. They're not in advance with their rent. They're not in advance if they've got a mortgage. They spend every cent. There is a strong commercial interest in keeping low-income earners with affordable rents because they spend in the rest of the economy.